Every construction site looks like a beehive of activity, right? People are moving, machines are running, it looks productive. But here's the big question. How much of that busyness is actually getting the job done? In this explainer, we're going to dive deep into something called work sampling. It's an incredible technique for figuring out what's truly adding value and what's just, well, waste.
Welcome to Bodhi Unified Flow. Our whole mission here is to take on exactly this kind of complexity and make it simple. We want to give you a clear framework to not just measure, but to really amplify your project's performance.
All right, so here's our game plan for today. First up, we're going to talk about the big problem, all that hidden inefficiency. Then we'll introduce the solution, which is work sampling. We'll get into the language of value, a new way of seeing work. After that, we'll decode what's happening on site, look at a real-world case study with Carpentry, and then, the best part, how to turn all these observations into real, solid optimization.
So stick with us, because by the time we're done here, you're going to have a super practical framework. You'll be able to define, identify, and classify work on your site, and most importantly, turn that knowledge into actual real-world improvements. All right, let's kick things off with a problem that I bet every single construction manager knows all too well. On the surface, right, your site looks like it's buzzing, a real hive of activity. But dig a little deeper, and underneath all that motion, there's often this silent killer, a hidden drain on your resources. It's the mystery of lost time and lost money. And that brings us to the fundamental question, really. If you could just hit a pause button on your project right now and walk around, what is each person really doing in that exact moment? Are they building? Are they waiting? Are they looking for a tool? The answer to that question, well, that's the key to unlocking a whole new level of productivity. And look, this isn't just some academic exercise. Let's be real, labor costs are one of the single biggest levers on your project's profit. So understanding where that time is going, it's not a nice to have. In today's market, it's absolutely essential for survival. Okay, so we've established there's a problem with all this hidden inefficiency. The big question is, what do we do about it? How do we make the invisible visible? Well, that's where our main tool comes in, work sampling. I want you to think of it like an X-ray for your site's productivity. So what is this thing exactly? Well, at its core, work sampling is a really smart statistical method. This isn't about standing over someone's shoulder all day long. No way. Instead, it's about making a ton of quick, random observations across the entire site. You just see what someone's doing at that exact moment and you log it. And when you do this enough times, the stats give you this surprisingly accurate big-picture view of what's really going on. And this is so important. It gets to the real purpose here. This is not about pointing fingers or blaming individuals. Not at all. It's a diagnostic tool for the system itself. The goal is to find the roadblocks, the bottlenecks, so that everyone, management, supervisors, the workers on the tools, can work together to make the whole process better. Now, to use a tool like this, we first need to be speaking the same language. We need a new lens, a new way to see every single activity that happens on site. And that lens is what we call the language of value, which comes straight from the world of lean construction.
Okay, first up, and this is the most important one, value-added work. This is the good stuff, the reason we're all here. It's any activity that physically changes the material and directly builds the thing the customer is paying for. We're talking about welding a beam, installing a window, laying bricks. You get the idea. This is the work that creates direct, tangible value.
Next, we've got a slightly trickier category. It's called necessary non-value-added work. Now, these are the tasks that don't physically change the building, so the customer isn't technically paying for them, but you absolutely have to do them. Think about safety briefings, mandatory inspections, or even just moving materials to where they need to be. We can't get rid of these things, but the goal is always to make them as efficient as humanly possible. And finally, the third category, non-value-added work. Let's just call it what it is, pure waste. This is any effort that burns up time, money, or resources without creating a single ounce of value for the customer. The classic culprits? Waiting around for materials, searching for tools, having to redo shoddy work, or just walking around aimlessly. This is what we're hunting for. This is our #1 target for elimination. Okay, that's the theory. But how does this actually work on a busy construction site? Well, it's pretty straightforward. We take those lean ideas, value-added, necessary non-value-added, and non-value-added, and we map them to 3 really simple, practical categories that anyone can observe. So here's how it all breaks down. Everything simplifies into these 3 buckets. Any action you see on site falls into one of these. Direct work, that's our pure value-added time. Indirect work, That covers all those necessary support tasks. And waste work, well, that's the pure non-value-added stuff we want to get rid of. Let's dig into these a little more. First, direct work, or DW. This is the hands-on stuff, the physically productive work. It's the whole reason the crew is there in the first place, right? It's the welding, the bolting, the installation of drywall, you name it. This is the time spent actually building the project. Then there's indirect work, or IW. Think of this as all the essential support tasks, things like preparing tools, moving materials to the workface, measuring and laying things out, even talking to your supervisor about the next step. You just can't do the direct work without this stuff. But again, the goal is to make it as lean and efficient as we possibly can. And finally, we have waste work, or WW. This is the time that's just gone, completely lost. It's walking around empty-handed, waiting for instructions or materials, being away from the work area, and the absolute worst, having to do rework. Just figuring out what percentage of the day is spent on this stuff is the critical first step to getting that time back. Okay, so theory is great, but let's see how this looks in the real world. We're going to check out a really detailed case study from one of our sources. It focuses specifically on what carpenters are doing day in and day out on a construction site.
And what's so powerful here is the level of detail they went into. To do this right, you have to go deeper than just those three main buckets. For this carpentry study, get this. The researchers created 41 different activity codes. So production wasn't just production, it was broken down into all these specific C100 codes. Even something like talking was broken down into different types.
And this is where you really see the power of this whole method. An observer sees a carpenter putting in insulation. Instead of just writing down direct work, they log a specific code, C102. Suddenly, you've connected a real-world action to a very precise data point. And that's what opens the door to some seriously detailed analysis.
Which brings us to the final, and honestly, the most important part of this whole thing. Look, the point of work sampling isn't to make a fancy report or a colorful chart. The data itself isn't the destination. The data is just the starting line for making things better.
It's all about a cycle of improvement. It goes like this. You observe and you categorize. Then you analyze all that data to find the patterns. Where's the time really going? Third, you dig deep to find the root cause of the waste. Fourth, you put a real targeted solution in place. And finally, and this is so important, you measure again to see if it actually worked. That right there, that's the engine of continuous improvement.
All right, so let's quickly recap the big takeaways here. First, on-site labor is a massive driver of your project's bottom line. We've learned that work sampling is a diagnostic tool that lets you see where that time is actually going. We now have the language for it: direct, indirect, and waste work. And most importantly, we know that the data we get from this process is what gives us the power to make smart, targeted improvements.
And that really leaves us with one final crucial question. We've walked through how to take all that invisible waste on your projects and make it visible. The data is right there in front of you. So the question is no longer what's the problem. The question now is, what is the very first thing you're going to do to fix it?
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. The ideas we've talked about today are built on some really solid research going back decades. For any of you who want to dive even deeper, we've put the key sources up on the screen. We really hope this gives you the tools you need to start turning that waste you find into real, tangible value.